Welcome. It is Verdict with Senator Ted Cruz, Ben Ferguson with you. It's nice to have you with us. And Senator, we've got some data that has come back, and it should make every American excited, especially hardworking Americans that are working hourly wages, working overtime. They are taking huge advantage of the major tax cuts that were passed in the big, beautiful bill.
Well, we have some stunning results in terms of how nearly every American in this country got a meaningful tax cut from the Working Families Tax Cut. We're going to break that all down for you. We're also going to talk about bringing manufacturing and shipbuilding back to America, and in particular defeating Russia and China in the Arctic with ice cutters, a big national security step forward and a big step forward for jobs and for the future of manufacturing in America. But before we do all that, I need to ask you, for those of you who are not watching the video, and by the way, we do this on YouTube, we do this on Rumble, but if you're not watching the video, I need to ask you, Ben, are you trapped in some sort of Paisley hell? Like it really does seem like this prison cell of beige Paisley behind you that I'm looking at you going, what on earth are my eyes gazing upon?
So I am more patriotic and love America more than you do right now in this moment, because I am in Boston and we are doing our family vacation, and I am at the oldest hotel, continuously running hotel in American history. And this is the room that they put me in to do the show tonight, which is one of their meeting boardrooms. But it's the oldest hotel in America. It's right where everything happened in Boston. All the history is out the front door and to the right, and so that's where I am right now. Plus, you know the Park House rolls? Because don't act like you don't know what a Park House roll is. I know you love those, right? Do you love those rolls? You know what I'm talking about, the yeast rolls? I'm waiting. You're a fan, right?
I'm trying very hard to do no carbs. So yes, I love them, but I'm trying to do no carbs, so I'm trying not to have them.
Okay, so I am at the hotel where those were created. And so when you get here, they tell you, they're like, by the way, this is the Park House. That's, yes, the rolls. You can go in the restaurant right here and you can get the original recipe that started and went all over the country. So there you go. So I got even that on you. And they were really good. If you were here, I promise you would partake. They're that good.
So I will say, for the record, you're saying that for vacation with your family, you felt the need to flee bright red Texas, to flee the land of liberty, the land of individual rights, to go to Elizabeth Warren's hometown, that you wanted to be surrounded by Marxists who want to take your guns. Is that right? Is that your family vacation choice?
No, the family vacation was we're going to go to where America got started and the 250th anniversary, and we wanted to show them all that America was and where it began and where people fought and died for this country, and I figure they're old enough to do that. So that is
Amen. Amen. And as you know, I lived in Boston 3 years during law school, and I will say, hold on. I don't like the politics of.
What was the name of that law school you went to? So we should make sure we get that out there, right?
It was Boston Community College.
Okay, there we go.
And look, I don't like their politics of who they elect into office, but I will say Boston is a beautiful city. And B, the history. Boston, along with Philadelphia and New York, are probably the most important cities in the founding of our country. And in terms of just where the founding, and also Virginia, not sort of Richmond, but kind of all of Virginia. You look at those collectively, they produced the most extraordinary generation of statesmen, between Thomas Jefferson of Virginia, the author of the Declaration of Independence, an extraordinary leader, John Adams from Boston, Samuel Adams from Boston, Alexander Hamilton from New York via the Caribbean, George Washington from Virginia, those. For anyone who knows American history, Boston is an extraordinary place, and you know what? I still have hope. And call me, listen, I mean, when I was a kid, we referred to it as the People's Republic of Taxachusetts.
Yeah.
I still have hope. I will tell you, I've spent real time campaigning, and I've lived in Boston 3 years. I spent time. There are good conservatives there, and most of them are sort of beaten down, and they think like the Harvard faculty liberals will run the state forever. I actually have hope even for bright blue states like that the pendulum can shift. But that being said, it hasn't shifted yet.
All right. So, by the way, we have Verdict listeners here. We have had 2 thumbs up while we were walking.
A lot.
And that's a lot for here. And then we've had 3 middle fingers to me while walking around with a family. So we're almost at like 50-50, which is a lot higher than I thought we'd be at this point. You got to keep track of it. And you'll love this.
But by the way, did I ever tell you, Kate, a couple of years ago, I was down on the U.S. southern border in Mexico, in Texas, but coming in from Mexico, and it was a border checkpoint where there were a lot of 18-wheeler truckers coming across. And I was just standing at the checkpoint. And so there's just 18-wheeler after 18-wheeler coming across. And I got to say, if you're driving a truck across the U.S.-Mexico border, you're not expecting to see, like, the Texas senator standing there at the checkpoint.
Yeah, that's a fair point,
so every truck driver is startled. And I actually took an informal poll.
Yeah.
And almost every single truck driver gave me a finger, either the thumb or the middle finger. And it was a beautiful informal poll. And I got to tell you that particular day, the survey, the ratio was about 80-20. I got about 80% thumbs up compared to 20% middle fingers, but almost nobody refrained from expressing a view. And it was just one finger or the other, and I kind of laughed at all of them. And said thank you and waved.
Yeah, you think God bless you and be safe on the roadways, right? So you'll like this. My oldest said, "Hey, Dad, I want to see Harvard." And I was like, well, we're not going to go tour it and waste our time. I was like, Dad has spoken at the Kennedy School several times, so one day maybe if I do that again, if they invite me back, then you can go. But I said, we will drive and I'll show you where it is, but you ain't going to college there. That was like the not happening. You're not going to Harvard. And I feel good about that. I feel good that was like good parenting 101.
All right, Ben, let me ask you this quite seriously. Your boys are world-class golfers. What would your reaction be if Harvard admitted them and asked them to play on the Harvard golf team?
Oh, I would say probably not just no, but hell no. That would just be because I don't want their mind to just be totally corrupted. By the way, I got to tell you this. I didn't get to tell you this, so this is exciting news. Bradley yesterday, this is super fun. He was 3 over through 6 holes. He knew that he was 3 off the lead. He went birdie eagle to qualify for the World Championships next year, went into a 3-way playoff. And in the 3-way playoff, he eagled the hole to beat the other 2 kids who had par putts. So he's going to Worlds next year. I just had to tell you. It was like the most fun moment being a dad caddying because he knew what he had to do. He went birdie eagle. He looked at me and he gave me a fist bump and walked off the green. It was so fun. But if Harvard calls and says, we gave you a full ride, I'm going to be like, well, that's good news because that means a bunch of other schools are going to call and give you a full ride one day. And I can't imagine sending them to Harvard knowing how liberal and woke they are now. Maybe it'll change. I'd love for it to change because when I was in school, I would have gone to Harvard if I would have gotten in, but I didn't. But I also didn't apply, let's be clear. But I mean, like I wasn't afraid of it in 2000 when I was graduating, thinking about going to college. Now I would be terrified to send my kid to Harvard.
Look, we'll see. I hope those schools come back. And I will say my alma maters, Princeton and Harvard, I think are probably embarrassed that I graduated from there. That doesn't make me terribly happy. But I do think that there's a lot to recommend them. I had a wonderful time. I loved my time in college. I loved my time in law school. And I do, part of me grieves at how woke higher education has gotten, particularly the more elite academic institutions, and I hope that changes. I do think one of the things the Trump administration is trying to do is to take on the woke culture. That's a hard thing to change.
Yes.
But listen, I would like many of our nation's leaders historically and probably in the future will continue to get educations at the most exclusive schools, and I would like them to be not communist indoctrination camps. So my hope is they'll get better over time. I don't know if they will.
All right, Senator, so let's get into these incredible tax breaks, and this is a story that the media is refusing to cover because it's such incredible news for the average American, hardworking American. Before we get to that, though, I do want to take a moment and talk to you about the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews and the work that is continuing to be done for those in need right now in Israel. When you hear about Israel in the news, it's easy to think of headlines, politics, or another conflict far away. But for families in Israel and Jews around the world,
This is incredibly personal. Anti-Semitic attacks in the Holy Land and across the globe are happening right now. Elderly Holocaust survivors who endured so much already again fear for their lives. Jewish families are praying for the freedom to worship in safety. And in moments like these, your voice matters, because your voice can remind them that they're not alone. The International Fellowship of Christians and Jews is inviting you to leave a personal prayer or message of encouragement that will be delivered directly to someone in Israel who needs hope right now. Not filtered through the media, not lost online, but personally delivered. A simple prayer, a few heartfelt words. They can lift the spirit of someone facing fear, uncertainty, and isolation. This is more than support. This is standing with Israel when it matters the most. Go to prayifcj.org. That's pray, P-R-A-Y, ifcj.org. And you can submit your prayer today. That's prayifcj.org.
Senator, this story of what Republicans did with a big, beautiful bill, we are now seeing the fruits of that legislation. It had an amazing impact on tax day and filing for so many Americans, especially those working hourly wages, those working overtime, just trying to get ahead for themselves or for their families. And if you look at it in comparison to what the tax bill would have been for Americans if Democrats would have gotten their way, this is a story that I can't believe it's not being celebrated, and yet the media is acting like it didn't even happen.
Yeah, listen, if you're a taxpayer in America, the odds are overwhelming that you got a tax cut as a result of the working families tax cut last year that President Trump signed into law, the Republican Congress passed. And the odds are significant that you got a big tax cut. We're going to break down the numbers, but it's worth understanding. If you haven't heard that, that's not an accident. The media doesn't want you to hear that. The Democrats don't want you to hear that. They want you to believe that nothing happened. Let's look at the data. Here's the data. This is a story in the New York Post, the headline of which is, almost every U.S. tax filer got a cut this year, coming to a total of $82 billion in relief. This is from the Treasury Department. Here's what the Post reported. Quote, nearly every person who filed taxes this year received a tax cut, coming to a whopping $82 billion in relief, according to the Treasury Department. Data released Tuesday showed 97% of filers scored a cut. 97%. Have you seen that on ABC? Have you seen that on CNN? Have you seen that on MSNBC? Why haven't you? 97%.
The argument that liberals made to say no to this big, beautiful bill was they said it was only going to affect the wealthiest one percenters, the rich. Bernie Sanders, AOC was out there.
It was a lie.
Right, it was a lie, because 97% means the majority of Americans are not billionaires and millionaires, to use Bernie Sanders' line. So they just flat out lied to you, and they knew it.
And the data are even more compelling. By the way, the contrast, if we had not passed the working families tax cut, you know what would have happened on January 1st? There would have been a $5 trillion tax hike. That's what Democrats wanted. Instead of 97% of taxpayers having their taxes cut, you would have had, I don't know if it's 97%, but it would have been virtually every taxpayer having a massive tax increase. So that's the choice, either a tax cut, which is what has happened, or a massive tax increase. And here are the specific data. Treasury officials said filers making $100,000 to $200,000 who tapped the new brakes pocketed an average cut topping $1,250. So if you made between $100,000 and $200,000, you got over $1,000 in tax relief. While those with incomes between $50,000 and $100,000 grabbed more than $815 on average. That's additional money in your pocket to pay for food, to pay for education, to pay for the needs your family has. What else? More than 7.5 million workers claim the no tax on tips tax break. By the way, I am the author of No Tax on Tips. If you're a waiter, if you're a waitress, if you're a bartender, if you're a taxi cab driver, if you claim no tax on tips, I wrote that law. 7.5 million workers benefit from it. The average deduction was $7,000. $7,000. Now, I got to say, to a waiter or a waitress, or taxi cab driver, or bartender, or barber, $7,000 is real money. You want to talk about delivering relief? That's real money. But you know what? That is small in terms of the number of filers compared to no tax on overtime. How many filers do you think benefited from no tax on overtime?
Oh, it's going to be astronomical number compared to what the Democrats said. They said, oh, this is not going to work and no one's going to care. Well, guess what they did?
Well, more than 29 million filers benefited from no tax on overtime. The average deduction was $3,100. By the way, where do they fall? The Democrats and the media are going to say it's all the rich. 3/4 of the people who benefited from no tax on overtime, their income fell under $100,000. You know how many people earned under $200,000?
How much?
96%. This was a targeted tax break to working class Americans who needed it. By the way, the standard deduction was doubled. That simplified life for 127 million filers, which is equivalent to 90% of all returns filed. Have you seen that on the news? No, you haven't.
No. Yeah,
and in fact, Treasury said that number will go up because some people have filed extensions. They expect it to be more than 90% of filers will benefit from the double standard deduction.
You look at these numbers, Senator, and I go back to something that we mentioned earlier. There wasn't a single Democrat, if I'm not mistaken, that voted in favor of this, right? They were all unanimously
Zero. Zero in the House, zero in the Senate.
Yeah, so it was unanimous. The Democratic Party, and this should be a big issue, I think, in the midterms, they wanted a $5 trillion tax increase on the American worker, and they didn't want to pass no tax on tips. They didn't want to pass no tax on overtime. They didn't want to double the standard deduction. They said, let's be clear, you elect us, and we're going to raise your taxes by $5 trillion in the next tax cycle if they had it their way. That is the Democratic Party, which is why the media is not talking about this. The candidates on the Democratic side aren't talking about this. Like, this affected almost every tax filer in America in a positive way. Why on earth is this not getting more coverage than it is right now?
Look, it's up to us to share that. And that's one of the reasons. For every one of you that listen to this podcast, that watch this podcast, share it. Because your friends, your neighbors, your family, your colleagues, they don't know this. The media is lying to them. They don't want them to know that they've gotten a significant tax cut. Let's take the Trump accounts. As you know, I wrote the Trump accounts. The Trump accounts and the school choice provision, both of them I wrote. I think they're the two most consequential provisions of this entire bill. To date, more than 5.5 million Trump accounts have been opened for kids under 18, and 1.4 million kids are eligible for the $1,000 contributions that are there for newborn kids.
Incredible.
How many of the kids do you think are from families earning less than $200,000?
I would bet a large percentage of them, and that's exactly the way you guys wrote this.
Yep. 86%. So when the Democrats of the media say, oh, this is just a benefit for the rich, that is a lie. 86% are going to kids of families earning less than $200,000. All right, let's take, on top of that, no tax on Social Security. That is obviously targeted towards seniors.
Yeah.
More than 30 million Americans claimed a deduction for no tax on Social Security. The average deduction is more than $7,500. Look, many of our listeners are young. We've got a lot of listeners who are at high school, who are in college, who are young working professionals. But we also have Gen X listeners and we have listeners that are seniors. If you're a senior, if you're on Social Security, no tax on Social Security provided real relief to you. And by the way, if you have a family member, if you have a mom or grandfather or uncle or aunt or a family member who's on Social Security, send them this podcast. Let them know that their taxes went down for one reason and one reason only, because President Trump was reelected and because we had a Republican House and Senate. And if they like their taxes going down, they want to continue to have a Republican House and Senate. Now, what is interesting, do you know what the benefit is to GDP from the working families tax cut.
What's the number?
The estimate is that the GDP is 1.2% greater in 2026 this year. Next year, it will be 1.4% greater in 2027. And then in 2028, it will be 1.5% greater before settling in at a 1.2% long-term gain. That is real wealth that is impacting real families, and it's not just a handful of gazillionaires. It is every worker in America. That's real results, and the media desperately doesn't want you to know about this.
I want to take a quick moment and talk to you about an incredible organization, and it is called Compassion International, and how you can get involved. I want to be honest with you for a second about how an act of compassion really feels. A couple of years ago, I made the choice to partner with an amazing organization called Compassion International. Why? Because I wanted to sponsor a child in need. It was a nice idea, sure, but I had no idea just how much that simple act would change my life as well. I sponsored Nadia and got to watch her life change right in front of my eyes, going from starving literally alone on the streets to getting the health care and education she needs to reach her God-given full potential. I got to be a part of that change, and the light of that compassion not only illuminates in her, it illuminates now in me. That is the power of compassion. The light of Christ shines on all of us. Feel it for yourself and change literally a child's life. Change the world, and you also change yourself. You can sponsor a child today. Visit compassion.com. That's compassion.com.
I want to move Senator on to another really interesting story. It deals with national security, especially with what's happening in the Middle East and Iran right now, and something that we've highlighted and talked about on the show in the past, and that was that shipbuilding was not happening in the United States of America. That is a national security issue, and it was a very clear national security issue that was brought up. You were one of those sounding the alarm on it, because when you're dependent on your ships being made overseas and you have things that happen, whether it's COVID, right? That's not even a war. But with COVID and all of these issues that we're now seeing in the Middle East, we needed to bring shipbuilding back to the United States of America, and now we are seeing that actually happen.
Yeah, another one of the major provisions of the Working Families Tax Cut was the funding for the Coast Guard. And the way it works in the Senate, when you're writing a bill in reconciliation, which is the process we used to pass the Working Families Tax Cut, each committee chairman writes the portion of the bill that is within his or her jurisdiction. I'm the chairman of the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation. We've got jurisdiction over about 40% of the U.S. economy. Every single provision that was in my jurisdiction, I was responsible for writing, and I did write. One of the subjects that is within the jurisdiction of the Commerce Committee is the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard falls within our jurisdiction. We funded more than $24 billion, billion with a B, into the Coast Guard. That is the largest single investment in the history of the United States in the Coast Guard. I want to give you a sense of the order of magnitude of that. The annual budget of the Coast Guard is between $11 and $12 billion. In 1 year, we invested more than double the annual budget of the Coast Guard to rebuild their fleet, to rebuild, to purchase new ships, to purchase new helicopters, to purchase new capital and infrastructure. One of the biggest elements of our investment was Arctic ice cutters. So if you look at the Arctic, the near the North Pole and all around the Arctic, that is a major national security contested domain. Russia and China are both killing us in the Arctic, and the United States has fallen way behind. And we put in the funding to build new Arctic ice cutters, and the Trump administration signed a contract to purchase 11 new Arctic ice cutters, and in particular to build many of them here in the United States. So I started this week, Monday morning, down in Galveston, Texas. And in Galveston, we had a groundbreaking for a brand new shipyard where there's over $1 billion being invested. It's going to create more than 2,000 jobs to build Arctic ice cutters. And not only is that important for that investment, those new jobs, But that's an expertise that doesn't exist in the United States. We're going to see more commercial ships built in the United States and in Texas and Galveston and Port Arthur because of this investment. I spoke at the groundbreaking. Give a listen to hear what I had to say at the groundbreaking. And I was very proud when President Trump announced that $3.5 billion was going to Navy Defense to build 5 Arctic security cutters and to build them here in the Texas Gulf Coast. That is going to produce over 2,000 high-paying jobs here on the Texas Gulf Coast. And mark my word, that's just the beginning, because that is going to fuel a renaissance of shipbuilding right here on the Texas Gulf Coast. A final observation about Galveston. Folks here are really particular about Galveston. It's a thing. You will learn there's a phrase that folks from Galveston will tell you, which is BOI, born on the island. And it's a little bit, there's an old line that you never ask anyone if he's a Texan. If he is, he'll tell you. And if he's not, you don't want to embarrass the guy.
I love, by the way, that line there, Senator, because it is, by the way, totally accurate. But this is a really big, I think, moment, as you described it, for national security. It also makes us not dependent on foreign countries and foreign workforces for things that deal with national security. This is part of what you've been advocating for with America First policy is with the Trump administration as well. And being able to do this and do it quickly and also to get these cutters back into the Arctic where we need them from a national security standpoint, this is a big win all the way around, and it produces American jobs. And not just a few. As you mentioned, you've got thousands, and then you have the support jobs around those jobs as well.
Well, that's right. And let me tell you a little bit of history. Look, you're a relatively new Texan. You're from Memphis. So this is a bit of history that I shared at the press conference that you may not know and that everyone in Galveston knew, but maybe other people don't. So Galveston used to be the largest city in Texas.
Wow.
Galveston was called the Queen of the Gulf Coast. Galveston was also called the Wall Street of the Southwest. And Galveston was called the Ellis Island of the South. And just like Ellis Island, when people came as immigrants, they would come to Galveston. That was the port of entry where vast numbers of people came to America through Galveston. And what happened is in 1900, there was a devastating hurricane that killed between 8,000 and 12,000 people in Galveston. And they didn't have the technology to have any early warning signs. So the hurricane just hit and destroyed the city. And it remains the single most devastating natural disaster in U.S. history. But a really cool fact that I pointed out, and I bet you don't know this, Ben. In 1836, Galveston was the capital of the Republic of Texas. The Republic of Texas, we were our own nation, and Galveston was our capital right when we became our own nation. And so I said, look, it's really special that we're seeing thousands of new manufacturing jobs coming to Galveston, shipbuilding jobs. And I mentioned in the clip we just played the phrase BOI. And by the way, you'll meet people from Galveston who are 5th, 6th, 7th generation BOI, born on island. And what I called for at the press conference is I said, listen, every Arctic ice cutter you build there, I turned to the CEO of the company Davies that's going to be building them. And I said, I hope and expect on every one of those Arctic ice cutters, somewhere in the interior on the hull, you will engrave the simple letters BOI, because those Arctic ice cutters will have been born on the island of Galveston. And that's an awesome thing, but it's an awesome thing for American jobs. You look at what President Trump is fighting to do, what I'm fighting to do, it is bring jobs back to America, manufacturing jobs. And I'll tell you a little bit, let me bring you a little bit inside the story. So the bill we wrote, we had the funding for what was likely to be 5 to 6 Arctic ice cutters. And there was a battle. There was a battle that went to the White House about where that contract would go. And that battle was principally between Texas and Louisiana. Now, I love Louisiana. My parents met in New Orleans. My mom went to high school in Baton Rouge. Louisiana is a great state. And to be clear, Louisiana is the home of the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and Steve Scalise, the House Majority Leader. They're both very good friends of mine. They were understandably fighting for their state and wanted the shipbuilding in Louisiana. I was fighting for Texas, and I will tell you, it was a knife fight at the White House. I spoke repeatedly to the President of the United States. I spoke to the senior staff in the White House over and over and over again, and it was a real fight. We didn't know who was going to win, Texas or Louisiana, and I want to give the President real props here. Look, we all know before he was in the White House, the President was a businessman, and he is very committed to getting more for less. So the proposal, the legislation that had been passed, was funding to build 5 to 6 new ice cutters. Trump said, that's not enough. I don't want 5 to 6. I want 11. And so they found new funding that had been appropriated by Congress. And what they ended up doing was approving both. So there's several ice cutters being built in Louisiana. There's several being built in Texas. And it was a win-win. And it's a great example. And he went to the shipbuilding companies and he said, I want you to cut your prices and deliver more ships, and they did. And this was not staff-driven. This was, Trump is a builder, so he likes things like negotiating a contract, and he leaned in, and instead of 5 to 6 ice cutters, we're getting 11. Instead of just one place, Louisiana or Texas, we're getting both, and we're getting thousands and thousands of new jobs, and we're going to be able to compete with and protect our national security in the Arctic against Russia and China. It is a win-win all around.
It really is an incredible story. And again, when you go back to fighting for America first, this is what you get when you get the votes together to do it. It's incredible. Congrats and a big victory for American workers there. Don't forget, we do this show Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Hit that subscribe or auto download button so you don't miss an episode. And what we told you today, please share it on social media so other people hear the news about the tax cuts. It really is incredible. And the Senator and I will see you back here on Friday morning.